I was finally moved into my first place on my own. I was working 2 jobs to afford it, but it was a freedom I had never had before. I spent the first 6 years of my life moving from crack house to crack house with my mother and living in a group home until I was 18. I lived with roommates after that until I was 25 and was lucky to get this place. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor apartment in a 5-story building smack dab in the middle of downtown Phoenix. I had never been so lucky in my life. 2 weeks later, I got the news that I had won a full scholarship to Arizona State University. Life was going so well. I admit it was tough working 2 jobs and going to school, but I knew it was temporary and one day I would be able to work 1 job and get a house. I was determined and happy. I had lived in my new home for about 7 months when it started. I came home and noticed a drop of dark red liquid on the kitchen floor. I had pizza the night before, so I thought it was sauce, but when I wiped it, it looked more like blood. Maybe I cut myself or something? I dismissed it and went on with the evening. 2 days later, I woke up on my only day off in weeks and the drop was back. In the very same place. I quickly cleaned it up. I made a thorough inspection of my body, looking for small cuts or scrapes, but only found a few bruises here and there. I chose to not think about it. I did not need anything added to my already full plate. About a week later, I came home late from my second job to find a small puddle of liquid in my kitchen. Same spot. It was about the size of a golf ball and shaped like a bow tie. I inspected the ceiling after that. I looked for soft spots or stains or anything. The vent was way too far for anything to drip out and get where the liquid was. I was so tired, though, so I cleaned it up and crashed into bed. I slept restlessly. Over the next months, the red liquid would appear randomly and in various amounts. I finally told a coworker, and she told me to take pictures and call maintenance. The next time a puddle showed up, I grabbed my phone and took a picture. This one was also shaped like a bow tie. However, when I opened the picture to show my coworker, it didn't show the liquid. It was just a picture of the yellow-tiled kitchen floor. I rationalized it by saying it must have reflected the light and not shown up, but it disturbed me more than I wanted to admit. I had a couple days off and I was really looking forward to staying home and reading a good book. Maybe even binge watching episodes of my favorite shows. However, I woke up to the biggest puddle of the dreaded liquid I had yet to see. I immediately searched through the junk drawer for the piece of paper with the number to maintenance on it and called. They said it would be a couple hours. I couldn't leave the plate-sized puddle on the floor for hours, so I cleaned it up. I couldn't help but compare it to blood. It was the color, the thickness, and it even smeared like you see in the horror movies. I tried really hard not to think about that. A bearded man named Stuart arrived a few hours later. He looked tired, but cheerful. I told him what I was dealing with after beginning with "I know this sounds completely bizarre." He agreed that it sounded very strange, but he was sure there was an explanation for it. He got down on the floor and looked under the cabinets, the fridge and the dishwasher. He then went and got a step ladder to inspect the ceiling. He didn't find anything, and I felt some serious disappointment. He stepped down from the step ladder and asked a few questions about when I saw the stuff and what it looked like. I felt like I needed to prove that the blood-like liquid was real. So I pulled the trash can out from under the sink to show him the paper towels I used to clean it up. The trash can was full of paper towels, but not a single red drop was on them. I could not believe it. I muttered something about invisible ink and swore I was telling the truth. Stuart put his step ladder in the hall and told me to call if the liquid showed up again. He was shaking his head as he walked out the door. I had no idea what to think. Was I going crazy? Was the stress getting to me? More than likely, my mother had some form of mental illness. Maybe this is why she got hooked on drugs. Maybe I was going down that path. I shook my head. No. I was different. I was holding a 3.5 average in school and my bosses both said they were happy with my work. I wasn't going crazy. The next few weeks flew by. Exams, busy season at work, and I met a guy named Aaron from the first floor of my building. We had gone out on a few dates. I had forgotten about the evil red liquid until I came home from work in the early evening to the floor covered in it. It looked like an animal had been slaughtered. I ran out of the apartment, and down the stairs and knocked on Aaron's door. I told him the whole crazy story, and he suggested we get maintenance before going back up there. Stuart didn't look too annoyed that we were at his door and was willing to go with us back to my apartment. However, when we walked in the door, the kitchen was spotless. Not a single sign of red anywhere. I stared in disbelief and shock. I looked at the number on the door to make sure we were in the right apartment, even though it was my key that opened the door and my furniture in the living room. Stuart and Aaron stood next to me, silent and awkward. I stammered out, "I'm not lying or crazy, but the evidence wasn't exactly backing me up." Stuart politely excused himself by saying something about his wife having dinner ready. He shut the door behind him, and I broke down in tears. I totally expected Aaron to run out and ghost me, but to his credit, he didn't. He stayed and helped me dry my tears. However, we didn't talk about it after that. It was the elephant in the room when he was at my place, though. I almost hoped that just one time, Aaron would see the blood on the floor, too. Then came the horrific day in March. It was the 13th, but a Tuesday. I was almost done with school. I could see the finish line. Aaron and I were getting serious, and he had introduced me to his parents. We had just spent the day helping his sister move into her dorm and were going home to shower and change our clothes to go out for dinner. He walked me to my apartment. The smell hit us as soon as the elevator doors opened. It was awful. I felt sick to my stomach. It was even worse in my apartment. I called Stuart, grabbed some clothes, and went with Aaron back to his apartment on the first floor. The headline in the local paper read, "11 bodies found in serial killer's apartment." He had killed and dismembered at least 11 people and just left them on the floor of his kitchen. He was dubbed the bow tie killer because he had a significant bow tie collection in his closet. His kitchen was directly above mine. He was a quiet neighbor, and I only saw him once or twice on the elevator or by the mailboxes. I would never have thought he was capable of the crimes he was convicted of. The strange thing is that he had cleaned all the blood up. There wasn't a pool on the floor or anything to soak into the tiles and down into my apartment. Poor Stuart helped with the cleanup and told me. I was horrified and had nightmares for a while after that, but I felt relief that I wasn't as crazy as I was starting to think. I moved in with Aaron a week later, and they had to completely gut the killer's apartment to get rid of the smell. I've always been a believer in the idea that you never truly know someone until you've lived with them. That belief was put to the test when I moved into a new apartment and found myself sharing it with a roommate who seemed perfectly ordinary at first glance. Little did I know that my life was about to take a dark and disturbing turn. His name was Eric, and he appeared friendly enough when we first met. He had a warm smile and seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of having a new roommate. I remember thinking that I had lucked out, finding someone so seemingly pleasant to share my living space with. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something off about Eric. It was subtle at first, just small oddities that I dismissed as quirks. He would often stay up late into the night, pacing back and forth in his room, muttering to himself in hushed whispers. Sometimes I could swear I heard him talking to someone, but whenever I asked, he would quickly dismiss it as nothing. Then there were the strange objects that started appearing around the apartment. I would find random items placed strategically on the kitchen counter or hidden away in the back of the bathroom cabinet. A lock of hair, a cracked porcelain doll, a faded photograph of a long-forgotten family. Each discovery sent chills down my spine, but I couldn't bring myself to confront Eric about them. I was afraid of what I might find out. One night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I heard a soft scratching sound coming from the wall adjacent to my room. At first, I thought it was just the sound of rodents scurrying about, but the scratching grew louder and more persistent. It was as if something, or someone, was trying to claw their way through the wall. I decided to investigate, my heart pounding in my chest as I crept towards the sound. As I reached the wall, I noticed a faint outline of a crack, barely visible in the dim light. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed my ear against it, listening intently. What I heard next made my blood run cold. It was Eric's voice, but it was distorted, filled with anger and desperation. He was talking to someone, or something, on the other side of the wall. His words were garbled and incomprehensible, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but it sounded like a plea for help. That night, I barely slept a wink. The knowledge of what I had heard gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living with a disturbed individual. The next day, I decided to confront Eric, to ask him about the strange occurrences and the unsettling noises coming from his room. But when I knocked on his door, there was no answer. I called out his name, growing increasingly concerned. Finally, I mustered the courage to open the door, and what I found inside will haunt me forever. The room was empty. Completely bare, devoid of any furniture or personal belongings. It was as if Eric had never existed. The only thing left behind was a single note, lying on the floor. I picked it up, trembling, and read the words scrawled across it in shaky handwriting. "They're coming for me. I can't escape. Don't trust anyone." I dropped the note, my mind racing with questions. Who was Eric? What had happened to him? And most importantly, what was he so afraid of? To this day, I still don't have the answers. Eric disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a trail of unsettling mysteries. I tried to find answers, reaching out to the authorities and searching for any information on Eric's background, but it was as if he had never existed before he became my roommate. No records, no photographs, no traces of his existence could be found. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. I would often catch glimpses of shadowy figures lurking at the corners of my vision, vanishing as soon as I turned to look directly at them. My sleep became plagued with nightmares, filled with distorted faces and echoing whispers that seemed all too familiar. Paranoia consumed me. I began to question everyone around me, wondering if they were somehow connected to Eric's disappearance. Friends, neighbors, even acquaintances took on an air of suspicion. The walls of my own apartment felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with their secrets. One evening, as I returned home from work, I noticed a faint scent wafting through the air, a sickly sweet smell that made my stomach churn. The odor grew stronger as I approached my apartment door. Trembling, I unlocked it and stepped inside. What I saw froze me in my tracks. The apartment was transformed. The walls were covered in grotesque paintings, depicting scenes of nightmarish horrors and twisted figures. Candles flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced across the room. The air was heavy with an otherworldly presence, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn apart. I heard a faint sound, a soft whisper that sent shivers down my spine. It seemed to come from every direction, echoing through the apartment. "You should have never looked," the voice hissed, dripping with malice and malevolence. "Now, they're coming for you." Fear consumed me, and I fled from the apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I sought refuge with a friend, desperate for safety and answers. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized that there were no answers to be found. The nightmares followed me, relentless in their torment. Faces morphed into grotesque masks, and whispers filled my ears even in the waking hours. I felt a presence lurking behind every corner, watching, waiting for its chance to strike. I couldn't escape the feeling that Eric's disappearance was just the beginning, that something far more sinister was at play. I had stumbled into a web of darkness, and there was no way out. Now, as I sit here, recounting this horrifying tale, I can still feel their eyes upon me. I know they're out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to claim their next victim. They feed on fear, on the unknown, and they won't rest until they've engulfed every aspect of my life. I had just moved into a new apartment and was thrilled to start this new chapter of my life. The place seemed perfect, and my new roommate, Mark, appeared friendly and easygoing. Little did I know that beneath his seemingly pleasant demeanor, a sinister secret lurked. In the beginning, everything was normal. Mark and I would exchange casual conversations and occasionally hang out in the living room. But as time went on, I started noticing peculiar things happening around the apartment. Objects would mysteriously move from one place to another, and I would often hear faint whispers echoing through the walls at night. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination running wild, but the strange occurrences became increasingly unsettling. One evening, while Mark was out, I decided to explore his room out of curiosity. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but something inside me urged me to find out what was going on. As I entered his room, a chill ran down my spine. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, and a pungent odor lingered in the air. I quickly rummaged through his belongings, desperate for answers. Buried beneath a pile of clothes, I discovered a series of disturbing photographs. They depicted people, their eyes filled with terror, as if they were being tormented. My heart pounded against my chest as I recognized some of the faces. They were the missing persons from recent news reports. What was Mark's connection to them? Fear consumed me, and I knew I had to confront Mark about the eerie discoveries. When he returned home, I mustered up the courage to ask him about the photographs. His expression turned cold, and a twisted smile formed on his lips. He admitted to his dark deeds, revealing that he was involved in a sinister cult. My mind raced, and I realized I was living with a monster. Mark's demeanor transformed before my eyes, and he no longer resembled the friendly roommate I once knew. Instead, his eyes were filled with a deranged hunger, as if he delighted in the pain he inflicted on others. That night, as I lay in bed, terror gripped me. I could hear Mark pacing outside my room, muttering incoherently. My heart pounded as I listened to his footsteps grow louder, inching closer to my door. Every creak in the floorboards sent shivers down my spine, and I knew I had to escape before he reached me. Without a moment's hesitation, I grabbed my essentials and quietly slipped out of the apartment, praying that he wouldn't notice my absence. As I sprinted down the darkened hallway, the whispers grew louder, filling the air with a malevolent energy. Since that night, I've been living in constant fear, haunted by the memories of that sinister apartment and the twisted roommate I once called my own. I can't help but wonder if he's still out there, lurking in the shadows, preying on unsuspecting victims. So, my advice to you is this: be cautious when choosing a roommate, for the face they present may hide a darkness you never imagined. Trust your instincts and listen closely to the whispers of your intuition. You never know what horrors might be waiting behind closed doors.